Right, well, hi everybody. My name is Terry Collins. I'm Chief Exec of Durham County Council. I'd like to welcome and say hello to all my APSE friends. It's a great privilege to be giving this presentation to APSE, who I've been working with for all my career. I'm Chief Executive at Durham, as I mentioned. Durham is a large unitary authority, one of the largest in the country. We've got a population of about 530,000 people. We've got a real mix, really, of urban and rural areas, and we've got some significant areas of deprivation in the midst of that. We've mainly got in-house services with regard to our frontline services, but we do have a little bit of mixed economy as well with things like building services and so forth. So what I'm going to do today is just describe a little bit about our journey. So we're going to look back before we kind of look forward. And then we're going to talk about, what I think the new normal will look like when we hopefully get past the vaccine stage and we do actually start to recover properly. So I look forward to, as I say, telling you my thoughts. So really, the first thing I'd like to say, it's been an incredibly unusual time for all of us. I really recognise that every authority, every organisation would have been through some really difficult, challenging periods, particularly I think at the start of the pandemic, when we were all in lockdown, as we faced kind of the new world, with staff not being at work and with us providing frontline services only. But I think one of the refreshing, one of the most positive aspects of that time was the gratitude and the thanks that our frontline services received. And I'm not only talking about what happened in Durham, I'm aware this happened across the country, because I think people recognised the effort and all the challenge that we'd had in continuing with things like refuse collection, recycling, emptying of dog bins and so forth. And as I say, we were delighted to see messages being given to the staff, obviously safe distancing, and also positive comments being received on our Facebook and our social media sites, and indeed, photographs being sent to council officers, to myself, of our workers. And we made sure that our frontline services, kind of all received copies of that, and we also put things on the web and on our social media sites. But it was fantastic, and it's still fantastic to see our fantastic frontline staff being recognised, and long may that continue. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come as we move out of this, and we basically, people appreciate the incredibly difficult job that we do, whether it's in a pandemic, whether it's in severe weather, whether that be absolutely throwing it down with rain, snow, or even when it's extremely hot. Some of the tasks our people do are incredible, but they actually turn up every day and deal with those situations as they arise. So as I say, that work's highlighted, that positive work. So turning back to the actual situation that we're in, well, it was remarkable. I mean, in my sort of experience, we actually held a pre-pandemic emergency planning session about a week before we actually went into this situation, and that was on the basis that this could happen, not that this will happen. We all probably thought, the way this was looking, that it could possibly would happen, but at that point it was early days. And I'm constantly reminded that we all sat in a room, a large room, and we talked about the kind of issues that could occur and how we'd respond to them. And eventually we escalated the situation and talked about the different aspects of it. And within a week or so, we were actually facing that problem. So I'm not saying that Durham were particularly brilliant without that planning. I'm sure you're all doing similar sort of things, but it was just surprising and quite shocking that how quickly this did escalate, and how we actually moved from a situation where it was being covered on the news, it was being covered in our emails and our discussions, to actually a full-blown lockdown, staff working from home, and the world changing. So kind of quite incredible. We've actually got a slide on there at the moment that actually shows that our figure per 100,000 is 95. I mean, I wish it was at the moment. It's around about 400 as we speak. But clearly this has got a lot worse as we've got into it, and particularly as we move into the winter. And certainly we face a challenging few months until we get to the spring, till the vaccine's available. But hopefully what we can do is to rely on our experiences of dealing with this in the first time to actually hopefully get us through the second phase of it. So again, looking back, business continuity planning really came into force. I mean, all the work that we've all been doing over the years in planning for something like this, I think that's really helped us, and we're able to move swiftly into ensuring that there's things like strong governance in place, that we're able to operate, our council's operations across the board, across the country, without having things like a cabinet in place or a full council in place, and making sure that information was being, given to our members, to our MPs, and that we were informing our staff, the frequently asked questions, the real rapid change in culture that was required over those few weeks, as I say, from moving from a business as usual case to a really business unusual case. But I think we generally all got through that. In those early days, I remember saying that our prioritisation should be around children and adults, making sure that our children's services could operate, effectively, and that we were looking at, care homes, looking after the situation with the vulnerable, looking at the people who needed support at homes and so forth. So a strong, kind of focus on children's and adults generally as services. And also that refuse collection should continue, because we all know the impact if refuse collection didn't happen. I think not only would it be bad from a public health point of view in a pandemic, which wouldn't obviously be good, but I think the message that sends, the signals that sends. So refuse collection and recycling were key services to keep going. And then obviously things as well on the bereavement services side of things, unfortunately. So we had to prioritise our staff, we had to use resources, we had to service redesign, we had to actually use people potentially who hadn't been involved in things like frontline services in the past. I know that we used a lot of leisure staff to assist with recycling, with garden waste collections and so forth. And they were fantastic in their attitude, and indeed the staff have been incredible throughout. They've shown an amazing flexibility and kind of loyalty to the organisation, and the recognition that what they're doing is really important to the community at large. So service redesign, looking at how we do things differently, the issue about numbers of staff in cabs, the number about how we actually work safely in the pandemic, and then supplemented our arrangements with, as I say, with people who potentially working from different areas of the organisation. So flexibility was absolutely key. And I think, some of these messages, some of these, the experiences are going to be important going forward. Communication was also absolutely, vitally important. Informing the public, informing our members, our MPs, informing the media, informing our staff, making sure that all the various service changes that we were putting in place were articulated to to all those different groups, but also explaining why as well. So not only just saying that services were changing, but actually giving the reasons for that, and trying to make sure that people were behind it. And I think generally people were behind it. They did understand the reasons for what we were doing, but communication was absolutely the vital at that point. So what we found was, I mean, it's a great place to be. I'm talking about the Durham experience now. Hopefully you all found some sort of experiences, but our communities in County Durham, as I said, it's a large county, 530,000 people, mix of rural and urban. But actually, one thing about the northeast, and particularly with County Durham, is that people do support each other. They are loyal, they're hardworking, they're resilient, they're fun, and they all came together during the pandemic, during the early stages of the pandemic, and indeed they've all been together since. So what we put in place has been, largely supported. It's been complemented really by people who are working with the council, and actually where we've made the use of existing mechanisms that were in place. So we put two hubs together. We put one in the north of the county, one in the south of the county, And really there were areas where people could contact us to deal with whatever their issue is, whether they want to know more about the council, although obviously we've got things like contact centres in place and so forth. But actually they were mainly for support. So people who were struggling, people who needed some assistance with food, with prescriptions, needed financial support, whatever. That there were areas that were open 7 days a week, virtually, where people could contact either through the website or by telephone, where people could contact us. And as I say, they were incredibly popular, and some of the stories that came out of there at the time were heartwarming. Somebody who was down to the last couple of tins of beans, had nothing to eat, you were able to find a solution to that. A lady, an elderly lady who'd moved into the area fairly recently, who didn't know anybody, and she was worried, unfortunately, about dying alone and being isolated. And what we were able to do was to put her in touch with the community, and also arrange 3 weekly calls. So calls 3 times a week. Somebody would call her just to chat about how she was doing, and within a very short time, she became well known in the community, and her quality of life improved significantly. So, the hubs were incredibly important. We also pushed funding to our communities within the county. Since we became a unitary authority back in 2009, we set up what we call 14 area action partnerships. They're like mini councils in each of our areas. And we normally provide them with funding to focus on their local priorities as well as our county-wide priorities. And what we were able to do during that period again was to actually fund the area action partnerships, so that local issues that had been identified in need of support were actually helped with funding provided by the council. And again, that was very well received. And actually put resources to that as well. So if there were particular issues in localities which needed support, we were able to do that with the resources from the council. And really, we were building on the power of the community, whether that be the third sector, the volunteers, local church groups that were in play. Everybody was coming together to support each other, giving that some local governments, but with some central support from the council, who were almost like a hub and spoke method, where we were at the centre, we were pushing the funding out, we were pushing resources out, we were using the community, we were using volunteering, working with churches, you working with established areas to actually look after the community. And before a very short time, we were looking after several, almost a couple 100,000 people really, who needed our support, and that was very well received. So, role of technology, for those of you who don't know, this is Adam Driver. He was Kylo Ren in Star Wars, so we didn't quite get to Star Wars level, and we're not quite at Stormtrooper level, but technology played a huge part in what we did. And I think the biggest thing for all of us, and I think it's obviously going to be crucial going forward, is the rapid acceleration in the use of technology that has affected my council, and it will affect your councils as well. We fortunately have been going through a bit of a transformation journey, and we'd moved to Microsoft Teams just after Christmas, really, the full rollout across the council. And what we're able to do overnight was to move to virtual working, and with obviously people not being at the desks anymore, apart from the frontline staff, who were obviously continuing to work on things like refuse. And in some respects, much to our surprise, that worked really well, and it's been pleasantly received. I mean, I think people who were skeptical about kind of where we were heading in perhaps 2 or 3 years have now been convinced this is the way forward for the future. And actually, we can use technology, to have a better work-life balance, to have more modern ways of working, trust in the organisation, so that people can work from home as well as work from the office. And actually, that will help us in all kinds of ways. So I think we saw transformation happening. As I say, what would have normally taken 2 or 3 years happened in a matter of weeks. And I was delighted at how we all approached that. And it's been a positive generally, and I'm sure it's been a positive for you as well. So what that's seen is a new approach to meetings. You know, with like yourselves, probably been doing cabinet meetings, council meetings, scrutiny meetings. You know, the communications have been differently. We've had different ways of actually providing data and information management, and actually supporting our online teams generally. You know, with the use of technology and things like having virtual contact centres and having chat functions on our website and so forth, where, as I said, all these things have actually rolled out, and indeed the democratic process has still continued. So there's been very little, you know, difference really with regard to participation at meetings. We've had some fantastic community engagement. We've just now recently completed this last couple of weeks a consultation with each of our area action partnerships. That's all 14, about the council, about, you know, what we've been doing, and, you know, what the issues are in addition to COVID. And actually, we found, you know, remarkably, that the use of virtual technology has actually improved consultation, and we've had more comments, we've had more participation. You know, I think, you know, in some respects, going out on a cold November evening to a church hall or a parish hall, it's been made much easier by people linking in on laptops, iPads, or whatever the device will be, to actually contribute towards the process. So I think this is something that will definitely stay with us in the future, and it's been very well received. So the bottom line for me on this is, all this has been brilliant. All of it's been positive. Big surprise really at how quickly councils have been able to adapt, and how staff have been able to adapt, and how, you know, how flexible they've been. And those people who perhaps weren't IT literate in the past have now become, you know, kind of, if not masters, but certainly very capable of operating technology, and are used to doing Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, and actually working virtually online. So that's very much a positive. So as we move forward, then, well, I mean, neighbourhood services and our, you know, the frontline services will always continue to be, you know, extremely important to local authorities and members. We know that the kind of services that are provided touch everybody. We know that the state of the environment, the condition of the environment, the condition of things like street cleaning, how refuse collection is delivered, highway maintenance, how you know, kind of how we react to fly tipping, etc. That impacts on what people feel about the organisation. If that's delivered well, then people feel, you know, fairly positive about the organisation. But if it's not delivered well, people don't value where they live, and that has a real negative impact. So that's not going to change in the future. In fact, it might even be more important in the future, because as there is a change in work-life balance and the way that people work, modern ways of working, then actually people could be spending more time at home, and more time actually having to walk out at lunchtime around their local environment, and actually, you know, thinking more about, you know, what's happening locally. So, you know, that could be even more important in the future. And clearly, it's a very politically important issue that's put right. So there was going to be changes. The way that we operate, I think, you know, as I say, we're all working differently, and it's going to be absolutely important that we capture the positives, and that we, you know, we take away the, you know, the unnecessary, the ways that we, you know, the way that we actually operate the council now. We've reduced, in some respects, the bureaucracy. We've shortened the decision-making time in some of the things that we do, but while still ensuring that we are abiding by, you know, kind of constitution, that the various policies that we've got in place. But we've learned to work differently. We've adapted to, you know, the challenge that's in front of us. So, you know, we'll need to potentially slim down back office. We'll need to ensure that technology, you know, continues to be developed and evolved within our organisations, and that we use technology more effectively for things like contact centres, for enabling our frontline teams to receive feedback about various issues that they're experiencing. That our websites that we have not only contain information, but they contain apps and allow people to, you know, communicate virtually, and you know, I know we do that now in large degrees, but I think that this will expand, and I think just as the way that online banking has expanded, and the use of actually working with the council, communicating with the council, particularly with frontline services, that will also expand, and that will become a positive. So I've mentioned about, you know, I think unfortunately as a result of kind of what we've been through, I think I would be surprised if there wasn't more kind of hard times for local authorities. I really hope not, because I think we've been through quite a long period of, you know, of austerity, and obviously budgets have been reduced, which hasn't helped us, you know, in our response to this. But I do think that there will be efficiencies to be made by actually looking at the way that we've worked during the pandemic, and, you know, carefully, obviously dealing with the workforce issues around that. But we are able, I think, to work differently to reduce costs and to become more effective and more efficient. But as I say, it's important that we actually work with the workforce and relevant colleagues, trade unions and so forth, to actually find a way over a period of time to actually do that. But, you know, I think that is likely to happen. And I think the way that we interact with our public, the way that we consult, and the way that they interact with us will radically change as well. Because I think, as I say, people are now quite used to communicating by Teams, by Zoom, by social media, and that they will expect that will continue in the future. So really, I think building on the positive, you know, thinking about the financial context, thinking about our priorities and planning, and actually moving away from the old ways of working. And collectively, I think we can make this positive for, you know, for our sector, and I think we can make it positive for our community. So just to finish, I think it's been remarkable what I think local authorities have done during this period. Absolutely remarkable, and you should all be congratulated for what you've achieved and how you've been able to get through this. Unfortunately, we've still got some difficult times ahead, but I think what we've learned, say, through the first phase of the pandemic will help us going forward. Then when we reach the end, I think it's time to reflect, to look at how we've changed, how we've improved, how we've become more efficient, how we've become more focused on, you know, virtual working, how we've become more focused on using virtual working and things like social media and apps and the websites and so forth to improve the, you know, delivery, and really start to focus on that. We know that neighbourhood services, frontline services will be needed in the future. That's going to be crucial to people and how they feel about the area which they're living, and how and things like their well-being, with the maintenance of parks and maintenance of open spaces, floral displays and so forth. But what we can do is we can use our experiences from the pandemic in a positive way to improve our efficiency and hopefully build on fantastic work that we've all done during this pandemic. Thank you.